This ship is a work in progress. All stats are not final and are subject to change. The USS Kidd is a Fletcher-class destroyer launched February 28, 1943 and was named after Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd Sr., who was killed aboard his flagship, the USS Arizona, when it sunk at Pearl Harbor. The Kidd's first voyage was somewhat infamous. Under the command of Commander Alan Roby, the destroyer moved into New York Harbor flying the skull and crossbones of the Jolly Roger. Time magazine later that week carried a photo of Kidd stating it had been 100 years since the Jolly Roger had flown in New York Harbor. With that, the famed pirate Captain Kidd, also from New York, was adopted as the ship's mascot by the crew. A cartoon of the famed Captain Kidd was painted on the smokestack. This has been rendered in-game. Sensitive to the ship's namesake, the crew asked Mrs. Kidd, the late Admiral Kidd's wife, for permission, to which she agreed. In a more comical incident early in Kidd's career, she was struck by 2 star shells fired from the USS North Carolina during training. Her forward damage control party was exercising at the time, with a make-believe casualty strapped into a stretcher. One of the shells entered the ship and crossed just above the pretend casualty, resulting in a small superficial wound. Kidd's skipper reported to the task force commander, "Kidd claims to be the best prepared ship in the Navy. We had a victim already strapped in the stretcher when he was wounded." When Kidd finally got to the Pacific Theater, she embraced her piracy and grew notorious within the fleet. The crew members began to ransom rescued down pilots for ice cream from aircraft carriers, and the ship quickly became known as the Pirate of the Pacific. The Kidd was also one of the few destroyers to sport its own ice cream maker. Kidd did it all, fighting off kamikazes, clearing mines, and screening ships. She made it pretty far into the war without suffering any major damage. However, this luck would eventually run out. Wednesday, April 11th of 1945, an enemy plane dove to water level and began an attack on the USS Black, which was 1,500 yards off Kidd's starboard beam. Instead of crashing into Black, though, the pilot pulled up and aimed for the Kidd instead. Kidd's AA gunners scored several hits on the planes, but could not splash it down. The suicide bomber crashed into her forward boiler room, killing everyone inside. To make matters worse, the bomb carried by the plane catapulted through the ship and detonated moments later. 38 men were killed, 55 were wounded. Among the seriously wounded were the commander and the doctor. Kidd would be repaired and returned to the Pacific just in time for the Japanese surrender. She would see further service in Korea. Today, the Kidd is situated in the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where she's visited by thousands yearly. The Kidd, as depicted in World of Warships, shows a weapons configuration placing her in the April 1945 time frame. It was during this time that 51 Fletchers had their forward torpedo tubes removed to make room for 2 quadruple 40mm guns as part of anti-kamikaze efforts. At this stage in the war, the need for AA outstripped the need for offensive weapons. So let's talk about the USS Kidd in World of Warships. First thing you'll notice is that though this is a Fletcher-class destroyer, it's also a Tier 8 destroyer. This is a very intriguing move. Think of the Kidd as a Fletcher Light. If you love the Fletcher, and let's be honest, who doesn't, you may have to change up your mindset, as the Kidd is more like the Benson in many ways. The first and most noticeable difference the Kidd has is that it only has 5 torpedo launchers. As described earlier, the front launchers were removed in favor of extra AA guns, which the Kidd has in-game. The torpedoes the Kidd does have are the Benson torps. They're slow and good only for use against players that love straight-line sailing or close-in point defense. At 55 knots, it'll take them forever to reach their target if you're firing at something at range. They also reload very slow. Using my Fletcher captain, I'm set up to maximize my reload, and I still was barely under 2 minutes. That's tremendously slow when you only have 5 torps to fire. The Kidd is fast though, with a decent turning radius, and she's got defensive fire, which brings something interesting to the table. In fact, Kidd is faster than the Fletcher. 38 knots versus 36.5. However, the Fletcher can actually power through a turn quicker than the Kidd. Kidd also has really good US Navy smoke. It seems like the Kidd is geared towards ranked gameplay, as I have a feeling she'll have a lot more utility there than she does in regular battles. I use my Tier 9 Fletcher as a torpedo boat mostly. I would advise against that in the Kidd. Personally, I'd set her up to maximize her gun firing speed. Might even throw in Demo Expert on there, which could make for an intriguing setup. Bottom line is, I won't be playing this as a torpedo boat, and will use it mostly as a gunboat. The thing to keep in mind though is that matchmaking is really going to hurt this ship. The torpedoes are ill-suited for the rigors of Tier 10 gameplay. The guns aren't bad, but you may still find yourself outgunned by most of the T10 DDs and even some of the Tier 9s if you aren't careful. However, against its own tier, the Kidd does pretty good in a knife fight. Make sure you take full advantage of the 5.7 kilometer stealth capability of the ship and use it well. Your torpedoes, while ill-suited firing at targets further out, will still do fine against ships that wander in at 7 kilometers or less, especially if you have the cover of smoke. Overall, I have a feeling that the Kidd's going to be a very fairly balanced ship when it's all said and done. First, you need to get out of the mindset that she's a full-fledged Fletcher, though. I worry that some players might feel a little underwhelmed when they play the Kidd at first, especially if they love the Fletcher and play the Fletcher religiously. But the Kidd is not a Tier 9 Fletcher. She's a specialized Fletcher with a completely different role. My only huge gripe with her is her torpedoes. It's not the fact that they're the Benson torpedoes. That I can live with. However, given that she only has one launcher, 2 minutes is just way too long for 5 torpedoes. I think the 1 minute mark is a little more suitable given the torp speed, damage, and the likelihood of being up-tiered into Tier 10 battles. If you can get past that though, then you can start to make her work for you. I definitely think she's geared towards ranked gameplay, and I think Benson lovers will feel right at home with the Kidd, more so than Fletcher fans. And don't forget, she's got that really good anti-aircraft capability as well. Anyhow, that's my look at the Tier 8 Premium Destroyer USS Kidd. Thanks for watching. Stick around, more coming. Zoup out.